Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and welcome to the Insider Exclusive. Today, we have some breaking headline legal news regarding the writers' strike and entertainment law in general. Stay tuned.
I'm not advocating piracy in any way. I'm just saying, you know, we've got to all, as a society, figure out what we're going to do.
So many shows that have been shown in Europe and Asia, all over the world, and we're not receiving residuals for them. As a matter of fact, we don't even know how much residuals we're talking about. They won't account for it.
They will intentionally test the limits. And I always say, you want to test the limits, then you're probably going to go over. And if you go over, I'll be there to catch you when you go on the other side.
I am very pleased to have with us today Neville Johnson. Thanks for being with us. You're with the law firm of Johnson & Johnson in Beverly Hills, and you've been in the news recently a lot, haven't you?
Somewhat.
You've sued on behalf of many members of SAG, WGA, and DGA. You've sued them. Tell us a little bit about that case.
Over $100 million has been collected for the last 15 years or so from foreign entities for things like cable television transmissions and
this is in their bank
blank
account.
tape levies and other monies, and these are monies that should be going to creators such as directors, members of the Writers Guild, or screenwriters generally, and actors. Unfortunately, only about half of these monies have been paid out, and the rest of the money is just sort of sitting in these unions' coffers, and we brought class actions initially against the Writers Guild on behalf of people who weren't even in their union. So the Writers Guild went out and collected all this money, a lot of money, and had done very little, if anything, to get the money paid out to these people. So that led to the Directors Guild, and now we're doing the same thing for the Screen Actors Guild.
And is the suit's been filed already?
There's 3 suits pending.
Okay, and what is their response to this?
They've fought very hard. They always get good counsel. Where we're at right now is the Directors Guild. We're pretty close to a settlement.
Really?
After initially fighting us, the WGA has been trying to say we don't have the right to sue for various technical reasons, but and they took us to federal court. The federal court said, no, you're going back to state court. So we just in the process now of getting certified as a class, which the court has indicated is going to happen, and we'll take it to the next step, which maybe there's been rumblings of the settlement might occur. We'll see.
Why are they withholding the money to begin with? It's
they
rightfully earned.
Are claiming that it's just really tough to pay out these monies and to find some of these people.
Right.
And our position is, look, it's not finders keepers in the world. You have what's called a fiduciary responsibility, just like accountants do, and banks, and lawyers, and doctors, and anybody else. You have a responsibility to handle this money properly, and the 2 key things we're trying to establish are accountability, transparency, and full disclosure, and that's what we need. That's what we need to happen. In other countries of the world, the money gets paid out. They have societies, they're called collection societies, that collect and pay out these monies.
You represent a lot of cases on contingency, don't you?
Yes, sir.
In other words, you go after a big entity for people who really can't afford individually to sue them. And if you're successful, then that's how your law firm wins, basically.
Well, in the case of class actions, our fees are set by the court.
Yes.
Court says
but you have to win first.
You absolutely do, and we have to put out a lot of money oftentimes to get to that stage. And there are cases, class actions in particular, that don't make any sense unless they're brought on behalf of so-called little guys or individuals as representatives, because it might only be $5 or $10, or let's say several $100s in any particular case. But in these cases, they amount to millions of dollars collectively. So that's what we're trying to do, is make them accountable.
Now you have a website. What is that? Would you mind giving it out?
Yes, it's jjllplaw.com.
Okay, and your telephone number in Beverly Hills?
310-975-1010. 1080.
When we had an initial conversation before the show, you mentioned to me that your objective is to make sure that the entertainment comes, the big ones, make sure that they pay everybody they rightfully deserve.
Well, that's what, I work in the music industry as well, and we brought class actions, for example, against the record clubs for not paying songwriters fairly. We have some class actions we're going to be filing shortly on behalf of songwriters and composers in the music industry. And generally, one of the things we do as lawyers is we go after the big entertainment companies. For example, I represent a major star who's been on the lead on 2 television shows everybody would know.
Who's that?
I'm not going to tell you, but
Okay.
You would all know who this person is, and we're checking into his royalty profit participation right now. Take a look at what's going on with the Writers Guild strike right
Yes.
now. What happened back in the early 80s, about 84, was the writers made a deal on DVD and videotapes. DVD wasn't even around then, so it was videotapes, in which they were getting, the statistic I heard yesterday was 4 cents the sale of
I
a
heard the same
videotape
thing,
or a DVD. Well, the major revenue today in motion pictures has been DVDs.
Yes.
And not certainly still theatrical. So it's grossly unfair the share of the profits that they're getting. I mean, I don't see how they have any choice but to go out on strike.
I read that what they want is 8 cents, which is 4 cents more. And because of the new media avenues of distribution on the internet, DVDs and the money that it comes in, why don't they ask for more? Because this is going to be a continuing issue, particularly when I think the wholesale value of a DVD is $10.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, if they're going to go on strike, let's go on strike for some big numbers so we don't have to come back 3 years from now and do another strike.
You're not going to get any disagreement from me, but the future is that DVDs are going to be out probably in 5 years or so. Everything's going download, internet right now. Interestingly enough, for me, last week I was in Nashville at the World Intellectual Property Organization conference, in which all the collection societies from around the world came to talk about what's happening. How about this for a statistic? I heard from the guy from the RIAA, which is the Record Industry Association, saying that it's somewhere between 51 and 96% of all music on the net is pirated.
Wow.
And so the movie companies right now are saying, look, we want to be able to set the price for any of the downloads that we're selling. And others are taking the position of saying, you don't understand. You have lost the war. You have lost the war. The only way you're going to get paid now is to have a tax on everything and divide it up in proportion to usage. Because the new generation and those using the net, it's just too easy for them to pirate away. So it is taking now a couple of hours or more to download something on audio-visual.
Yes.
But you'll all remember 8 years ago it took 20 to 40 minutes to do one song. Now you can get an entire album in a minute and a half. It's going to be down to 5-10 minutes. You'll be able to get a video in the next few years, and those are the issues that we're all going to be fighting, is piracy.
Right. Now, the MPAA, I believe,
Motion Picture Association.
they've been
America.
fighting piracy for quite some time, haven't they?
Yeah, and they're
And
losing.
losing.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that happened a couple of weeks ago was that woman in Minnesota,
Yeah,
I think it was, who
Went to court.
got a couple $100,000. Okay, it's a bad thing, but
Yeah.
as many people will say, it's really not good if you're suing your customers on a regular basis. Is it having an impact? Well, they said at the conference last week, it was symbolic. We're trying to let people know. And hopefully, I'm not advocating piracy in any way. I'm just saying, we've got to all, as a society, figure out what we're going to do. I'm in Japan a year ago, and I'm talking with the head of the Music Publisher Society for Japan, who says, I just spoke to the group of entertainment lawyers in Japan today, and I said, anytime there's a technological revolution, the laws have to be changed
Sure.
to fit into that right now. And that's what's going to happen in the United States of America. You've got these powerful interest groups. You've got the computer companies, the Microsoft,
Yeah.
the software companies. You've got the record companies. You've got artists. You've got the unions, producers, the equipment manufacturers. Nobody wants to agree on everything, and we can't do business as usual anymore. So there will be some sort of a solution. Life will go on, and we will all get paid.
Yeah, let me ask you this. As the intellectual property rights of a work that you create, a writer creates it, whoever creates it, why, when they have new technology, isn't that just extended to cover that new technology because it is classified as intellectual property?
I'll tell you what happened. I started off writing record deals in the mid-1970s, and nobody had any idea about the internet back then. In fact, nobody had any idea that the internet was going to take off in the year 2000, really. E-music, which was the sort of the first download service, started, I think, maybe in 98, maybe 2000, but it's only been the last few years that it's really begun to take off. It was a little slice of the business. Now it's growing exponentially. Now there are no more record stores, really, as we know them.
Right.
No more Tower. And we see now, Best Buy used to be, they would use records, CDs, as an inducement to get the customer in the store because they would give them good prices and a wide inventory. Go to a Best Buy now and you'll see there's a very small section and it's off in another area. They're using other things to get people into the stores now.
Yeah, but my real question is, if you have copyright protection on a work that you created, any new type of distribution method, whether it's on the internet or whatever, why isn't that covered under the same intellectual property rights that you received as a copyright
Well, there is,
holder?
it's enforcement. We have copyright protection.
Right, but why do they have to keep, like for example, when they come up with a new technology like DVDs, 4 cents seemed like nothing because nobody was making any money back then.
Rates aren't set. Look, rates are not, the rates that we're talking about now with respect to writers and directors are negotiated rates pursuant to collective bargaining agreements.
Sure.
We have other rate setting mechanisms in the United States. There's a copyright board that is in Washington that will set the rate as to what radio stations and cable transmissions and other entities are going to have to pay. And what is probably going to have to happen is that they're going to, the government's going to say, you're going to get this amount on music publishing, and you're going to get this amount on sound recordings, etc., or whatever it may be, unless the people can otherwise agree. Canada does it that way, for example. In Los Angeles right now, I mean in America right now, there's a fight going on on the music publishing level. In other words, whether they're considered to be downloads when you go and you stream music on the net or get something on the net, do you have to pay each time that happens, or is it what's called a performance, in which case you go through a performing rights society? And so even within the music industry, there's turf wars. There's turf wars going on around the world right now among collection societies because it's global now.
Let's talk about some of the other areas of law that you handle. You sue a lot of banks.
We have sued a number of banks, Bank of America, for example, and others, for cases where consumers are being charged unfair fees. You know, they don't know about them. They don't
talking about savings accounts.
Savings accounts, checking accounts. It's like, why am I getting charged this fee?
Yeah.
I didn't agree to this. Things like that.
Do they come back, well, it was in your disclosure document?
You wouldn't believe what they come back with. They come back with every excuse in the world, starting with, we didn't do it, to, we did it, but now we're going to beat you procedurally. You have to sue us in Delaware, and you can only go to bring an arbitration, but you waive the right to bring a class action, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, that's an ongoing battle for consumer attorneys everywhere. But
when you talk about you have to sue us procedurally, it makes me think, are there not judges out there who just don't rule by the law, but rule by laws of morality?
Look, we don't get me started on the judiciary, because I'm not going to bad rap the judiciary. I think we have a pretty darn good judiciary, but you know, it's imperfect like everything else, and laws are laws, and they can keep you tied up for a long period of time. But you know, we have certain courts and certain judges who are very shrewd, and they're going to do not only what's right morally, but also what's right ethically and legally.
Good. Now, I understand you sue a lot of insurance companies for, like, body shops.
Well, that's an interesting case. We are representing all of the body shops in the state of California. There is a law that says when you get into an accident, you take your car anywhere you want to take it, any body shop, and they got to pay you the fair going rate. Yeah. Our lawsuit says that the body shops we have aren't getting paid the fair rate because the insurance companies are going to the body shops and saying, we're only going to pay you $60 an hour, whatever it is, but the body shop says I charge 73. And they say, well, we did a survey and we're allowed to do a survey. Well, it turns out that the survey is filled up with people who are called DRPs, direct repair providers, who have sweetheart deals with the insurance companies. So they drive the rate down. Or else they haven't done the survey at all. They just say, tough, sue us. So we're doing that to keep these body shops going, because their unfair profits are being made by the insurance companies overall. And the flip-flop of that is that now some of the body shops are saying to the consumers, you will pay the difference. And so it's coming out of the pocket of the consumer because the insurance company isn't paying it, and we have lawyers who are working on sister cases to try and fight them. And this is a $1 billion in damages if we're right.
Right. You brought with you one of your clients today, Ken Osmond, who, if everybody doesn't remember, on Leave It to Beaver, he was Eddie Haskell.
Right.
And he is involved with one of your cases, isn't that correct?
The Screen Actors Guild case, he's the lead plaintiff.
Okay, and we're going to bring him on right now so he can talk a little bit about that. So let's go get him right now.
You got it.
Okay. I am pleased to have with me, and I really mean that, Ken Osmond. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
In case a lot of people don't remember Ken, Ken was on his show, which was one of my favorites when I was growing up, Leave It to Beaver.
Yes.
And he was Eddie Haskell. He was always that mischievous kid, you know, trying to give a snow job to Mrs. Cleaver.
At least you didn't say bad kid. People usually say bad kid.
No, he wasn't a bad
Eddie
kid.
wasn't bad.
He was mischievous, yeah. And after the show, you went on to become a decorated police officer, didn't you?
Well, no, not necessarily decorated, but I was a policeman, yes.
For 18 years.
Yes.
And you were a motor officer.
The last 7 years I spent on motors, yes.
And where did you work? In L.A., right? LAPD. Where did you work? The Rampart Division?
We worked the Rampart area when I was on motors. I was assigned to Central Traffic Division, but mostly Rampart area. But I worked all over Foothill and North Hollywood and move around during my career.
You were injured on the job, weren't you?
I was shot 3 times, yes.
Wow. How did that happen?
Car thief that just didn't want to go back to prison, and so he decided to shoot me instead.
Okay. Did you get the guy?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I shot him, and not mortally, unfortunately. Then my partner shot him again, and they captured him.
Yeah.
He served 3 years for shooting me and was out about 3 months and killed a man in a robbery.
Oh.
And he's on death row now for about 22 years now.
Living high on the hard.
I guess so.
That's amazing.
Can't rush into these things.
My God, that's terrible. Well, I'm glad to have you here. So I understand you're the lead plaintiff in a lawsuit that Neville has filed.
That's right.
Against SAG, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, basically, shows, not just my show, but so many shows that have been shown in Europe and Asia, all over the world, and we're not receiving residuals for them. As a matter of fact, we don't even know how much residuals that we're talking about. They won't account for it.
Right. How long can you collect residuals, Neville, on a show?
Well, in perpetuity. I mean, Ken will tell you that Leave It to Beaver is the longest running show on television. How many years?
50 years as of last month,
Wow.
without interruption.
That was my favorite show.
Well, why aren't you still watching
I
it?
am. In fact, I think I told you this earlier. I went to catechism class with Jerry Mathers, who hated to be called the Beav while he was in high school. This suit that you're looking to recover, what, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or...
Well, the Screen Actors Guild has said that they have collected over $8.5 million and basically have paid out, I think they said $250,000, but we're not sure if that's the entire amount.
So they're admitting they have it.
They're admitting they've had it for 15 years, or up to 15 years, let's say 10 years anyway, and they just haven't paid it out.
And the reason being?
They're saying it's really hard to calculate the monies and to pay them out.
Didn't they say something about not having a plan in place to do such a thing?
Yeah, they're just
I don't
saying
know
we're
how
just
long
not
takes to
able to
make a
do it.
plan.
What does that mean?
I don't
a
know.
plan in place to pay people.
So he is the lead plaintiff on behalf of 30 or 40, 50,000 actors who we intend to get paid. And there's going to be a lot of money like this coming in the future because as the world goes digital, these monies will continue to increase.
Many child actors, after they've had their, 2 or 3 or 10 years in front of the camera go on to lead lives which unfortunately are not good for them. You went on to a distinguished career at the LAPD. Do you work with or do you get in contact with other people who were on that show or any show?
Actually, I do. I see quite a few of the people from that era of television.
Yeah.
I do memorabilia shows and such occasionally and sign autographs.
Do you?
And there's quite a group of 50s and 60s TV actors that also attend, so I see a lot of them regularly.
Is it hard as a child actor to make the transition to be accepted by the public as an adult actor?
I think hard is probably a good word for most people. It's a necessity, though.
Yeah, sure.
When I finished Leave It to Beaver, I was very much typecast, and that's a suicide sentence.
Yeah.
In acting, you just can't get work.
Yes.
And I had gotten married, bought a house, ready to start a family, and I had bills to pay. So you go out and you get yourself a job.
In the
That's
LAPD?
life.
Yeah. Did you enjoy being an LAPD officer?
It's different. I wouldn't have recommended either one of my boys do it because there's a lot of potholes in the road.
Right.
But it was a good way to earn a living, and I educated both my sons in private school and had a good family.
Did they go on to be in the film industry at all?
No, they had a short spurt, a taste of it, if you will, in the new Leave It to Beaver. They were both in there as Eddie's sons. This was later on in the 80s. But no, the older son is a film editor now and doing very well for himself.
Yeah.
Younger one is a veterinarian surgeon. I got the greatest family in the world. Don't get me started on them. I'll be bragging all night.
Well, keep talking. But really, I'm glad you came on the show. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Oh, thank you.
Much
Thank you for having
success
me.
in your retirement. That was a real treat to have him on the show. You know, I remember when I was a kid, I was watching that show. He was one of my favorite characters, and I know that you probably enjoyed him having here too.
Well, it's one of the. I mean, it's a joy to be his lawyer,
Okay.
because he's somebody sure I grew up on as well.
Some of the other issues and cases you handle deal with media law, defamation. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the cases and what
Sure.
that really means?
Well, we've gone after newspapers, television shows, tabloids, etc., for defamation on behalf of the famous, the infamous, and the unknown, and we'll do that if the case is righteous.
We're talking like the National Enquirer and people like that.
Or ABC News. I've sued ABC 7 times, I think.
And you've won every time?
No, but one of my cases is now studied by every law student in America. It's a
Which one's
case
that?
called Sanders versus ABC. It went to the California Supreme Court, and it established the right of privacy for all Americans. And what they'd done was they'd used hidden cameras on the show Primetime Live to go in to a business and had a phony person, intern is what she was, who secretly taped other employees who hadn't done anything wrong.
Yes.
And then they put them on television and basically said they were bad people. And we won the first, it was the first trial in America where more than basically $1 in damages was given, and the first trial in America where punitive damages were awarded. And then I lost in the Court of Appeal, and then the Supreme Court unanimously 7-0 reversed and said, no, there are limits to what you can do.
Really?
Establishing, or further establishing the rule that you can't break a law just because you're a journalist. It's called, you can't break a law of general applicability like contract or trespass or fraud to gather the news.
Right. But you see that happen still today, don't you?
Yeah, well, what, you know, as it's so competitive out there in the marketplace, and that people will do anything to, you know, get television footage, and so they will intentionally test the limits. And I always say, you want to test the limits, then you're probably going to go over. And if you go over, I'll be there to catch you when you go on the other side.
What about this show To Catch a Predator? You know, these people unsuspectingly, no matter what character they are, come into a situation where they're being videotaped. They haven't given their permission. What about that?
Well, that's a very controversial subject amongst journalists right now. I don't represent anybody in connection with that, and in no way am I an apologist for people who are pedophiles or anything like that. But when you've got And Esquire did a recent story in which they criticized the show because they're an individual who had been a district attorney in Texas, I believe, who hadn't even gone to the place. They showed up at his house and he killed himself in front of the people that came over, and the people who were the officers on the show. In fact, ABC of all people did an investigative story on Dateline in which they had were criticizing it, saying why were they doing this, and this went over the line. Because the police officers, the detectives, were saying it looks like we were taking direction from the news media. Here's the deal. The news media should be watching the police. They shouldn't be in business with the police. When the news media is in business with the police and are taking orders from what is effectively a vigilante organization, that's a recipe for disaster ultimately.
Right.
So, I'm all for investigative journalism. It's my favorite kind of journalism. I want to see it happen. What's wrong with good old shoe leather? When you utilize deception to gather the news, you are breaking a fundamental tenet of journalism, which is I'm supposed to be truthful and objective in trying to get my story. And when I become an impersonator, I become a protagonist in the story.
You've handled some cases regarding idea theft, right?
Sure.
What are those kind of cases?
Well, you got to show access is the big deal. So I got 1 million people coming into my office saying, I got a story here, and I know it's this movie or that TV show, or it's this song was infringed in some way. I got to say, how did it get to this person?
Yeah.
So you show me good access. All right, I may be interested in the case, and then I got to have similarity as well. And we've done a couple of those cases. Nothing that has gone to trial. We've settled a few. Oftentimes what they are is we have legitimate guys in Hollywood who went in, who made a pitch, and voila, it ends up on on a television show. So
tough cases to win.
They can be tough, but I mean they can also be very, the right case can be worth a lot of money. I'm just telling you, look, Hollywood is, I don't think, any better or worse than any other industry. There's a lot of bad guys out there, and a lot of people who want something for nothing.
Yes.
So the number one rule I give everybody at all time when I'm talking about law is get it in writing. Do it in writing, whatever it may be. I don't care if it's your brother, your uncle, your mother, or anybody. If you're going into business with somebody, get it in writing. If you're making a pitch in Hollywood, you always have a leave behind is what it's called. That's what the term of art. You leave your project with that person so you can say, yes, that person had it, I can prove that he had it, send a follow-up call, something, or a follow-up note, and keep a record of all that.
Okay, good. And would you kindly give out your website again, please?
Yes, it's the firm's called Johnson & Johnson in Beverly Hills. It's jjllplaw.com.
And your phone number, you're in Beverly Hills?
310-975-1080.
I want to thank you very much for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for bringing your client, and we'll have you back again.
Oh, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank you very much for watching our show. You can catch more of these shows at www.insiderexclusive.com. Come back again.